Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. This is a Heel Heat Top 10. My name is George Coles and this is my tag team partner Mustafa.
Mustafa Saeed?
Yes sir.
Wow, check me out. Gary Rhodes, everybody.
If only one of your eyes went that way.
Shut up, New Jack.
Anyway, the top 10 for this week, as referenced from our friend Dizzle Pup, the top 10 talkers in the history of wrestling. And I'm going to go ahead and start this one off with a guy that's most people don't really think of when they think of talkers. He came a little bit before the nationwide exposure of pro wrestling. Mostly worked in the AWA, and that's Nick Bockwinkel.
One of the best talkers there ever was, though, back in his day. And a lot of the younger guys have emulated a lot of his interview styles.
Well, he's the first guy to go the cerebral route, no pun intended. A lot of what Y2J did when he slowed it down and talked, was more deliberate with his vernacular.
It was a bigger vocabulary.
Is directly related to Nick Bockwinkel. Nick Bockwinkel, during the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s, played it off as he was smarter than the crowd. And that's what basically made you hate him, which eventually turned you to love him.
Oh, yeah. Well, which our number 9 could be one of the most hated or most loved guys when he's wrestling. CM Punk. His pipe bomb, everybody it reminded of the pipe bomb. But it was a phenomenal interview. It's one of those interviews that really, if you weren't really paying attention to CM Punk at that time, you started to after that.
I actually prefer Straight Edge Society promos, and even some of the stuff he did in Ring of Honor, and the one in IWA Mid-South. But the Ring of Honor stuff, when he won the title and turned heel after winning the title, and mentioned being the Snake and all that stuff. The one where he gets mad at Raven and yells, "This is Straight Edge" at the end. But my all-time favorite is in IWA Mid-South when he's talking to the girl in the crowd. He's pretending to hold up a mic but doesn't have anything in his hand. He goes like this to her, and she goes to say something. He goes, "You stupid bitch! I don't even have a mic."
I like that. Those were all great. I did like the ones he cut against the Taker during his run for the streak. Some of the most, he went places that you wouldn't expect during this era of wrestling.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why I liked him.
Now our number 8 guy is a guy that revolutionized professional wrestling in the 1990s. The mad scientist, the genius, the messiah of wrestling, Paul E. Dangerously.
I thought you were going to take 20 minutes just for the introduction.
Paul Heyman.
Jesus.
Quite possibly the greatest mind in the history of wrestling.
Well, he's been in wrestling since he was, 15, 14, something like that, taking pictures.
Whether it be as a manager, as Paul E. Dangerously, as a commentator in WCW and WWE, or as the owner in ECW, no one draws a crowd into them more than Paul Heyman. Hell, this is a guy that would shoot promos on the wrestlers and get the wrestlers to believe him. All you really have to know about Paul Heyman is go back to, Beyond the Mat?
Mm-hmm.
Where they show behind the scenes at the first ECW pay-per-view, and he's controlling an entire locker room with, some guys that at that time were the biggest stars in wrestling.
With his Koresh style.
He's exactly what they say. He is the cult leader that could get you to believe anything. His promo at One Night Stand is one of the great promos in the history of WWE. His stuff he just did with talking about Undertaker makes you believe that Undertaker's vulnerable.
Oh, it does. Paul Heyman, like you said, brings that believability aspect to professional wrestling.
And he instantly makes anybody he's with that much more credible.
Oh, yeah.
Even a guy like Curtis Axel or Ryback, who are doomed to be mid-carders for life, became more credible with Paul Heyman in their corner.
I definitely agree.
And Brock Lesnar's nothing without him.
Oh.
Brock Lesnar's Nathan Jones or Matt Morgan, if he is not there.
Well, our number 7 guy was a guy that's been
I wasn't done talking about Paul Heyman.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm just kidding.
Jesus Christ. Let's make a whole thing about Paul Heyman.
Okay.
Never mind. I'm just kidding. Our number 7 guy is a guy that has been in wrestling his whole. He's a second generation wrestler. He's been around wrestling his whole life, and one of the just the way he's like with Heyman-esque style, where he the cult leader style. Jake Roberts. Jake Roberts was just such a great talker. It excites me to talk about Jake. If you can't tell. I mean, well, some of the stuff he did, like I was telling you beforehand.
You're getting flustered, Bubba, right?
I know. Get the table, Steve.
Good.
Anyways, shut your fucking mouth. Anyways,
go ahead.
Anyways, Jake Roberts. Oh, I don't know. Fuck with you. Anyways, Jake Roberts was a believable character during the cartoon era of the WWF. The way he did his interviews were just so dark. Well, when he was a babyface, you know, his interviews weren't a lot different. Just when he became heel, the whole Savage Elizabeth wedding thing was just so phenomenal. Man.
Well, the thing that stuck out the most in the era where everybody's screaming at the camera, "I'm gonna kill you! I'm gonna beat you! Say your prayers, eat your vitamins!" All that crap.
Just a monotone voice.
You get a guy coming out saying, you know, the one that you don't trust is the last word you think to trust is the one that stabs you in the back. Walks away. And he says it just as calmly as any serial killer ever would. He's almost, and I hate to say this, like Dexter, the TV show, where it's the guy that's just calm and serene, but then when it's time for him to go, he's a stone cold killer. Stone cold. Jesus Christ. But anyway, our number 6 guy gets on here because he cuts 4 different promos, basically, 4 different styles, and that's Mick Foley, aka Cactus Jack, Dude Love, and Mankind. And each iteration of the character, whether it be Mankind, Cactus Jack, Dude Love, or just as Mick Foley, each one of them had a different style and a different promo and a different way they would go about it.
What was your favorite face of Foley?
Cactus.
The original face?
Cactus is the best.
Face, yeah.
I mean, Cactus, to me, the original Cactus character that they brought in early 90s at WCW and wrestled at World Class, where he didn't care about wins or losses, he just wanted to injure people. To me, that character was revolutionary. I mean, how many matches did he win by countout? Just because at that time his move was the Cactus Elbow Drop.
Sure.
I mean, there was a guy that didn't care about the titles, only cared about hurting somebody.
I like the original Mankind. It was just a real dark character at the point they needed somebody to work against The Undertaker. And this guy was beating The Undertaker. And it just the way he was interviewed, the style. He was just like, we were talking about Jake earlier, where he was just calm. He didn't really raise his voice too much until he started getting upset. You know? Strictly crazy. That's what I liked about those.
It was every one of them. I mean, every character he did was money. I mean, even Dude Love was money.
Oh.
Well, easily the worst character he did was Dude Love, and that still was a main event wrestler.
And he sold more merchandise than most of the guys on the roster now.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, to me, the reason he makes this list is the fact that he was smart enough that when he does a different character, he changed the moveset and he changed the promo style.
Oh, definitely.
And he's got some of the great promos in ECW history. Even something as simple as the when he won the title and he grabbed the mic and did the Rocky line.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so memorable.
Now, our number 5 guy, speaking of, are you done? Because I know it's one of the ECW guys, and you take like 30 minutes for this one. All right. Anyways, our number 5 guy was the guy that I think changed the face of wrestling during the late 90s, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Stone Cold!
I mean, this guy here, his interviews were spot on. You either wanted to hate him or you wanted to love him.
What?
But when the what's came out, it was just like...
What?
All joking aside with the what's.
What?
Austin 316, I think, was dying down. But then when the what's came out, it was just... It brought him right back.
Really, Stone Cold said so?
Yeah. I think, honestly, you take all his slogans...
You take your solemns?
You take your John 3:16.
There you go.
Austin 3:16 says, "I just whipped your ass." Probably one of the most known interviews in wrestling history.
Most iconic by far. I mean, the guy, even before that, he was cutting killer promos and stunning Steve Austin.
Oh,
Look at what he did with the, remember the Flair for the Old?
Oh, God.
Him and Brian Pillman. And
I love that statue. I love that statue you got over there.
That gargoyle.
That's double A. Oh.
And then when he goes to ECW and he does the Monday
Night Club?
The Monday Night Club, and he basically does Stone Cold a year before he does Stone Cold on WWE.
The Stevester? I love the
Stevester, Stone Cold, or Monday Night Club. I mean, Austin was a guy that it took the smart people in wrestling took a long time to realize, let's let Steve be Steve. And then when finally someone said, go ahead and be yourself, Vince McMahon and Paul Heyman a little bit before him, and gave him the microphone to let Steve do what he wanted to do, Steve revolutionized wrestling and became the biggest star in the history of wrestling.
Arna.
Now, speaking of stars, we're going to go to our number 4 guy. Woo! Superstar Billy Graham.
Woo?
It's number 4.
Oh.
You got to woo for 4.
Oh, for 4.
Yeah, you get it now.
Does he lift barbell plates?
Anyway.
Does he eat T-bone steaks? Is he even sweeter than a German chocolate cake? Is he the lady's pet? The men's regret?
The man of the hour.
Is what you see is what you get. There you go.
Superstar Billy Graham, if you're not familiar with it, was exactly what his DVD said, 20 years too soon. Every wrestler that came out in the 1980s and even into the 1990s stole heavily from Superstar Billy Graham.
They pull their checkbooks out and give the man a portion of their salary.
Hulk Hogan is nothing without Superstar Billy Graham, because everything that Hulk Hogan did, Superstar did before.
Jesse Ventura.
Jesse Ventura is an exact photocopy of Superstar. I mean, it's amazing how exact they are. I mean, he dyed his hair. He wore the same boas, same tie-dye pants. Superstar Billy Graham isn't remembered a lot by, because most of your wrestling fans, we're talking 40 years ago now, was his heyday.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, he was marginalized. He didn't have a long run. He had a shorter run.
9 months.
He was a world champion at a time when people were going 5-6 years as world champions. He had a 9-month run. But Superstar laid the foundation. I would say even guys like Dusty Rhodes stole from him.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, the guy came in, and in the if you look back at his promos, basically what he did is he watched the blaxploitation films of the time and took the vernacular from those movies, put a white face behind it, and put it on the television.
The man's raps were beyond.
And that's basically, he was rapping.
Yeah, that's what he even says. He said, those are my raps. And he was, like you said, 20 years too soon. I mean, if this guy would have came out in 1990 and built this character up,
I mean,
he'd be on top of the game.
Even Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner, was blatant rip-off of Superstar Billy Graham.
Even Triple H admitted he ripped him off somewhat with his talking ability. That's why Triple H was one of the ones that wanted to induct him into the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
I mean, the guy had that much to do with wrestling, but his interviews were just so great. Now, speaking of great interviews and woos, Ric Flair, number 3. Ric Flair.
Why are you holding up a 4 and saying 3?
Because he's a 4 horseman.
But you gotta tell him it's number 3.
I said number 3, if you pay attention. I said Ric Flair, number 3.
Nobody pays attention to you.
Oh, shit. Anyways, Jesus.
Woo!
Nice to be back. Anyways, I mean, you take some of the interviews that he did with Dusty Rhodes when he was going against Dusty Rhodes, some of the interviews he did with Sting. Flair's interview carried him throughout his whole career, I think. I mean, he's great in the ring.
Fire me.
But just those interviews, man. Some of the consortium is me.
Anyway, Ric Flair, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone that's got a better all-around package than Ric Flair. I mean, the guy could talk, he could go in the ring, he had the look, he had the charisma, he had the style. He made $5,000 a night and spent 10.
He lived up to his character.
I mean, he lived up to his character plus $1 million. Ric Flair is the quintessential wrestler of the 80s. I mean, Ric's the guy everybody has taken from Ric. Everybody respects Ric. Even to this day, you give Ric an open mic and he's going to shut the crowd down. But
I'll shut the bar down too.
He'll shut the bar down, he'll shut the crowd down, he'll shut the alimony office down. I mean,
woo! Fire me, I'm already fired.
There's half a dozen alimony lawyers that owe their houses to Ric Flair. And probably half a million bartenders that owe their houses to Ric Flair. But he's a limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling and dealing, son of a gun. Hey, it's the oldest ride in the park, still has the longest line.
Oh, God.
Woo! Mean! Woo!
Oh, my God, Gene. Woo.
Yeah. Now, our number 2 guy is another guy just like Paul Heyman that's done pretty much everything in wrestling. He's been a wrestler, he's been a manager, he's been an announcer, and he's one of the all-time greats, Bobby the Brain Heenan. He was a guy, much like Paul Heyman, you could stick somebody with him and go, okay, Heenan, you got the Brooklyn Brawler, get him over. And he would get him over. Here's Big John Studd, get him over. Here's Haku, here's King Kong Bundy. And everybody you would stick with Bobby the Brain Heenan instantly became a main event talent, except for Mr. Perfect.
Whatever. Well, it's like when Andre turned on Hulk. The main ingredient in that had to be Bobby Heenan.
Yeah.
It had to be, because you needed a strong talker. You know, you just didn't have this ripping the shirt off and the chain off. You had to have him with Bobby Heenan show up at Piper's Pit at that time.
And how cool of a coincidence was it? He didn't mean to rip the chain off, but he ripped it off. How cool of a symbolism.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what people talk about. Well, right. I mean, you take the size of that guy's hands were so huge, and he just grows.
But Heenan, I mean, he could take a guy that couldn't talk at all and make him look like $1 million. He could take a guy like Ravishing Rick Rude that didn't need a Bobby Heenan and make him look 20 times better than he even did on his own. And
I think if Rude would have went with Heenan more on a lot of decisions, I think that Rude would have went farther.
Exactly.
Because Rude was working against it there.
And even if, and the thing that stands out the most about it is Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon on commentary. Even Bobby Heenan, later years when he started doing Monday Night Raw and then into Nitro, I mean, Bobby Heenan on commentary, he could make a heel faster than any promo segment could make him, any in-ring segment, any wrestling match could. Bobby Heenan lent an air of credibility to the heels.
Well, he did. I mean, take a look at some of the guys, we just mentioned some of the guys he's managed, and I don't think a lot of them would be in the areas they were because of it.
I mean, hell, we got 2 people on this list that were directly managed by Heenan, Flair and Bockwinkel.
Definitely. And neither of them needed him, but he added to it because they were willing to work with it. Like I was talking about with Rick Rude. I think if he would have worked with him like Flair did or Bockwinkel did, he'd have been a higher up on the food chain than what he ended up being.
Exactly. Now, before we get into our number 1, we're going to go into a best of the rest. Basically, these are the guys that barely made the list, or barely missed the list, but were still pretty good. I'll bet like you can start that one off, Gary.
Well, we've mentioned this guy's name many times before, Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, the American Dream, son of a plumber man.
I think more of a tribute act of Superstar, but he put his own little spice on it, which added to it.
If you will.
If you will.
Next up, along the lines of Heenan and Heyman, James E. Cornette, the guy that made the Midnight Express what they were, Yokozuna, Owen Hart, British Bulldog, announcer in his own right, booker in his own right, guy that hates everything modern about wrestling.
Talk about modern, the next guy I would put on there is Y2J, Chris Jericho. When he first appeared, his first segment on WWF was against The Rock, and he carried his own weight at the time.
Speaking of The Rock, another guy that deserves to be on here. Quintessential guy that fits in with the Attitude Era, with Foley, with Steve Austin. Right up there is Rocky Maivia, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, whatever you want to call him.
Another guy that was going up at the same time as him, and a guy that's still with the company today, and one of the best in the business, Triple H, because he's best for business.
Yeah. Now, before we get into our number one, if you've liked the way we did our list, if you don't like it, if you think we put up someone too high, put someone down too low, or left someone off altogether, let us know what you think. Hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on Twitter, put it down where?
Down there.
Right down there in the comments. I didn't miss that.
Yeah, you did.
No, I didn't.
I didn't miss it either. It's all the way over there.
Anyway. And I'll go ahead and let you take number one, Gary.
Well, number one had an emotional spot for you, Jordy. You told me a story how this guy brought you into wanting to watch wrestling.
My second favorite wrestler of all time.
Roddy Piper. This guy, I think, with his help, made WrestleMania and does not get the credit to this day.
Made Hulkamania.
He did, but WrestleMania's main event was built on Roddy Piper, not on Hulk Hogan.
If you look at everything leading up to that, going on MTV, Piper was in the main event. The Rock and Wrestling Connection, Piper was the one that attacked Cyndi Lauper and her manager. You know, Wrestling with Mr. T, Piper. Boxing Mr. T, Piper. Piper's Pit, WrestleMania 3. I mean, Jimmy Snuka and the Coconut. Everything Piper touched turned to gold.
Shaving a small person, like Mr. T.
Little Beaver.
Yeah.
Was it Little Beaver? Who knows? If we're wrong, tell us we're wrong. But anyway.
I was 7 years old, so I don't know.
But anyway, like he said,
Or 5.
a young George Coles turns on TV Saturday mornings looking for cartoons, finds wrestling, and this guy Roddy Piper pops on my screen. And even more than the heels, and you know this because when I was a kid, even as a kid, I was more drawn to the bad guys. I'm a Darth Vader fan. I liked Megatron from the Transformers. You know,
Decepticons had a better
Cobra Commander, all that stuff. I for some reason I liked the bad guys. I was a fan of the bad guys, and Roddy Piper drew me in. To as soon as I seen Roddy Piper on television, I was there watching that show every week. And heck, even one of the most famous Piper's Pits, he brings a jobber on, brings on Frank Williams, a guy that was just an enhancement talent.
from my Cincinnati.
Cuts the promo with him, beats him down, and lays one of the most popular Piper lines ever. Just when you think you have the answers, I change the questions. I mean, there's a million of them. I came here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm out of bubblegum. I mean, Piper, to me, and you're absolutely 100% right. Don't get me wrong. Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon deserve a lot of credit, but the guy that doesn't get the credit he deserves for building the WWE into what it is Roddy Piper.
You know, and he's a guy that deserves a belt. People say, he don't need a belt, but it would have been nice for him to have a belt.
It's a tribute. I think that's what they did when they brought him back and him and Flair were tag champions.
Yeah.
But basically, that's all I have to say about this list. Anything you need to add?
That's it for me.
My name is George Coles.
Gary Rhodes.
This has been another Heel Heat Top 10.